Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast. Now let me zoom in a bit because Abidjan is a autonomous district within this city here. So let me show you a little bit more detail here. So Abidjan, you can see, has a big star on it. We'll talk about why in a minute. But Abidjan takes up this area here. You can see that there's quite a few things in here. There's the Banco National Park. There's the Canal de Vridi and the Ivory Lagoon as well, among a few suburbs around the city. So that's what I wanted to show you. You can see the Gulf of Guinea coast here, the Ivory Coast, where the country gets its name. It's along the Gulf of Guinea in the Atlantic Ocean. So let me zoom this back out a bit so you could see where we are in the world. Okay. So Abidjan is a very major city. It is the biggest city in Ivory Coast. And there's not much else to describe because it's just a very small area. Let me go over its history and then I'm going to grab the tablet and just show you an overview of what the city looks like other than just a little dot on a map. Also, I'm filming in the daytime this week, so you might hear cars and the neighbor's dog barking, sometimes things like that. I don't know. But anyway, it's a beautiful sunny day. I'm taking advantage of the sunlight. So, during colonial times, this area was taken over by the French. Long story short, they were situated in the town of Grand Bassam here. Nice little port city with access to the ocean. But in the 1890s, there was a bad outbreak of, I just forgot, I think it was either malaria or yellow fever. One of those. So they needed a safer place to operate where people wouldn't get sick all the time. So they moved over to here. At first, they were in this suburb. I believe, if it's French, it's pronounced Bangevie. But in English, we'd say Bingerville, right? But I assume it's Bangevie. They moved here and slowly to this lagoon area in Abidjan. Now, there is a legend about how Abidjan got its name. There was a guy from the Chaman tribe who was cutting some leaves to make a roof, and a French soldier approached him and asked him what the name of the nearest village was. But he, of course, this man didn't understand the soldier, so he panicked, thinking he was about to be attacked. So he told him, "I was just cutting leaves." But he said it in his language, the Ivory language, and it came out to something like Bimenjan. So the Frenchman thought that was the answer to his question, and he wrote down Abidjan. And that's how, according to legend, the city gets its name. So they set up over here, moved out of Grand Bassam. And slowly but surely, this area started to become more and more important in terms of shipping to the port area. Became more of the economic hub of the Ivory Coast, which it's surprising that the country, when it reached independence, didn't change its colonial name. It's one of the very few places in the world that never changed its colonial name. So this area was called the Ivory Coast because that's what they were exporting out of there. So that's what was happening over here. They built a big rail terminus here that was going up to the center of their territory. Up here, I believe nowadays that line ends in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. And it just became slowly but surely a major port. There are many islands within the lagoon here, so bridge work began in the 1930s, and slowly but surely Abidjan became more and more modernized until it became the capital of Ivory Coast in 1934. It was definitely the biggest settlement, and it was starting to grow out to Bangevie and Jacquesville, which I don't think is on this map. It's just about, oh no, there it is, Jacquesville. And there are other towns around the coast. Grand Lahou as well. All those, right. In 1950, a big project was completed because, like I said, this area is a lagoon. It did not have sea access. So in order to export out of this area, they would have to sail to Grand-Bassam and transport it, or transport it over the land here to ships out here, which wasn't very helpful. So a big canal was built, and that's the Canal de Vridi. It was completed in 1950, and this made Abidjan an official seaport. So you can imagine industry grew even more. Then 10 years later, independence came to Ivory Coast. This area was still the capital, and the economy boomed in this area. Skyscrapers started to be built. The canal was used more and more for shipping access, not just for Ivory Coast, but for a lot of the landlocked countries up here, Burkina Faso, Mali, all of those. There's birds outside. That's pretty cool. Oh, they're flying over my house. Oh, so pretty. Anyway, I gotta stop being distracted. Abidjan. It was a very important port city for many people throughout Western Africa. And in 1983, the president, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, who's a very beloved figure in the history of Ivory Coast, decided to move the capital to Yamoussoukro. You can see right here. Not only is it more centralized to the country, uniting all of the different ethnic groups throughout the country, but it was also his home village. So he decided to build up this tiny little town into the capital. But a lot of... Ooh, a cloud just went over the sun. Sorry if it got darker for you guys. A lot of the government buildings are still in Abidjan. So Abidjan is still, in a way, the capital of Ivory Coast, in that the president lives here. All of the embassies are still here. A lot of government things are still done in Abidjan. Yamoussoukro is slowly but surely building up. It's a very beautiful little planned capital, but it's still, in a way, under construction. It's not nearly as big as Abidjan, not even close. So there is a star here because a lot still happens here in Abidjan, even though Abidjan is no longer the official capital city. Economically, the city has been doing very, very well for itself until the early 2000s. There was a lot of political turmoil beginning in 2002. Just in a nutshell, there was a man named Laurent Gbagbo. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. There was a coup right before the presidential elections, and the guy that ran that coup forced a lot of people who were running in that election to not run, and the only one left standing was Laurent Gbagbo. A lot of people weren't happy about that, so there were lots of protests when he became president because these people did not elect him. In a way, there was no choice for them. A lot of very violent protests broke out. French soldiers came in to try to keep the peace, and it just aggravated things even more. Lots of violence against them, lots of violence against the rebels in the city, and of course many civilians were caught in the way. Gbagbo became the president, however. Things kind of quieted down. People weren't happy with him. There were very militant people who supported him. And in 2010, there was another election. There was uncertainty during pretty much that whole decade, because Gbagbo said, well, I guess that election wasn't very fair, but I am president, so we'll have another election. And there was just so much violence that the election kept getting put off and off and off until 2010. And when the election happened, Gbagbo lost, and he refused to step down. So even more riots broke out. The Second Ivorian Civil War really exploded here in Abidjan. Many, many people caught in the crossfire. It was a very dangerous city for a few months there. Many people protested the election, and the soldiers of Gbagbo's government fired on the crowds. It was very, very tough, but thankfully Gbagbo was arrested, and peace has come to Ivory Coast. It's not nearly as violent as it was 10 years ago. It's much more chill now. Abidjan nowadays is known for its crazy nightlife. Apparently, it is a great place to go clubbing and partying and all those fun things people do at night that I don't know about because I'm kind of an introvert when it comes to things like that. I also don't drink or anything, so a lot of the appeal of clubbing is kind of lost on me, but I do love dancing. So apparently there's a big DJ scene in Abidjan, and it's just a really fun place to be in the nighttime nowadays. So that's what Abidjan is mostly known for nowadays. Let me grab Google Earth. There aren't a lot of good pictures of Abidjan to show you, but I just want to give you a scope of just how large this city is. It's considered like one of the top 10 growing economies of African cities, like one of the major cities. This city is huge, right? Let's start down here on the waterfront. So we can see, let me X this out for a second. Those lines are gone. Can see the lagoon all going through here. It's I think it's the Komoy River that flows into this area, creating the lagoon. And then here's the canal there that creates this kind of brackish water. You can see a weird picture there. And it makes for very interesting, like, little shipping ports around the area. You can see shipping there. Some over here. There's the big university there. That's pretty cool. The University of Reedy, the canal there. There's this big island here. This area is known as, I think it's Treshvi. And Marcory is kind of like a very fancy place. But like the Manhattan of Abidjan is Plateau. This is where all of the big skyscrapers are built. And now I'm going to try to pull Abidjan back up here to show you kind of what the skyline looks like. So big, bustling city, all the skyscrapers there. Lots of little food stalls and things. This is pretty much like the best slideshow I found for Abidjan. Lots of little markets, big bustling city, everyone out and about. And yeah, there we go. That's kind of what I wanted to show you. How it's kind of like Manhattan, how it's just an island full of just big business buildings, right? That's what I wanted to show you the most. I just got an itch on my foot. I'm sorry, I wiggled everything. All right. So next I want to show you the Parc National du Banco. If you can't tell, they speak French in this country, right? It's a French-speaking country. So right smack dab in the middle of this big city, we have this gorgeous national park, which if you look at it from above, it's this big old chunk here. This is like the Central Park of Abidjan, right? If we're comparing it to New York City, but much more forested. Beautiful big old trees here. Parc National du Banco. Very big old trees and a cool forest there. The forest school, isn't that neat? All kinds of things here. This is mostly just pictures of trees, which you get the gist, right? It's very, very beautiful, but it's all pretty much like a little forest right in the middle of this city. Now you might be thinking from way up here, like, ASMR Geographica, the city doesn't look too big. Let's just dive into a random part of the city, right? Let's just go in. Let it load for a bit. And as we scroll, you kind of get a better feel of how massive this city is. I'm just bouncing around. Big old highways there. Lots of schools. Lots of hospitals, institutions. Everything a city has. For the longest time, Abidjan had the only ice skating rink in West Africa. Isn't that cool? Big island here. Oh, this is Plateau. We're in Plateau now. Go over here. There's even more city over here on these islands. I guess there are a lot of parallels to New York in this place, isn't it? It's the water. Even more. We're in the suburbs here. Like, it is huge. That's the water. It is a massive, and see, like, there's even more up here. It just keeps going. It is a huge, huge, huge city, right? It's so fun to explore. So much. And I've tried to look at all these little places, try to find unique places, but they're all pretty much like people taking selfies in front of them, so they're not terribly exciting pictures. But the autonomous district, you can see, follows the lines here. So even though it isn't very city from the looks of it, it is still pretty populated around the outsides here. Lots of farmlands. The main crops in this area of Ivory Coast are things like fruits and things, I believe. I almost started reciting statistics for the next place we're going to. I don't want to get into that. There's the big international airport, the Felix Houphouët-Boigny International. This is the largest and busiest airport in Ivory Coast. Basically, if you're going to Ivory Coast, this is where you're flying into. Paintballs over there. Little gardens and parks. All kinds of things, right? Look how busy it is down here. It is a thriving, lovely, amazing city. So that's pretty much all I really wanted to show on the tablet. And I think that's it for tonight. Let's zoom out, just in case you don't really know where Ivory Coast is in the world. There's Côte d'Ivoire, there's Abidjan, and there we are in West Africa. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good night.